Hey y'all, and welcome back to Black Girl Magic Book Chat Women's History Month edition. My name is Larissa. I'm the African American Resource Center Coordinator, and every week this month I am reading a book by a Black woman about Black women and Black girls in honor of Women's History Month and just to celebrate the voices of Black women over various genres. This week was a doozy, and I know I say that every week, but that's mostly because I keep picking great books. So, but this book was like 200 pages. 200. I read the large print version because I can't see. And I think it was like 43 pages. And there was so much meat. So this is the book, Read at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. Like I said last week, this was written just a few years ago in 2019. And it got a lot of hype back a few years ago, and I ended up not reading it because I have this thing about reading books when they're super popular. Anyway, that's another thing. But I understand the hype. It was incredible. It was a real look at a real family and kind of how decisions can change people at the snap. So this is a non-linear story that explores the relationships of and between Melody, who is 16, I think, at the start of the story, her mother, Iris, and her father, Aubrey. They had Melody when they were teenagers. And then it also looks at Sable and Po'boy, who are Iris's parents, and Kathy Marie, who is Aubrey's mom. So we've got these three generations here. And at the start of the story, Melody is 16, and it's the day of her coming out. I cannot, and I don't want to look back through it, but I can't remember what it's called. But think in the same line of quinceañera or bar mitzvah, that those ceremonies, Black people have those as well. Usually wealthier Black people kind of have these extravagant ceremonies. And so it starts there. Melody is there. She's like getting dressed and she's talking to her mom, who she calls Iris. She calls her by her first name. And this is when we learn that Iris never had hers because 16 years ago she was pregnant and she couldn't. So that begins our journey. The best way I think to break this story down, because like I said, it's non-linear, so it kind of ebbs and flows, and each chapter is a different point of view, and we get to see their thoughts in these points of view about different things, pretty much like the relationships that they have between each other, and kind of what happened after Iris got pregnant and the way that they changed everybody, like changed who they were. So because it's written like that, I think the best way to kind of talk about it with y'all is to break it down by themes. There are a lot, so I'm not going to talk about every single one of them. I will choose kind of three that I think that stood out to me the most. So family is one. And I think family is a theme in so many books, just because family, or even the lack of a family, has so much to do with who we are as people, how we navigate the world, how we navigate relationships. And so family. There are two Black families that we focus on in this book. Iris's family, they're pretty well off, and Aubrey's family, which just consists of he and his mother, and they're poor. And so Iris grows up knowing that the world kind of is at her fingertips. It's in this very subtle way, like they are well off, but kind of in the same way that people who grow up well off kind of have expectations put on them. There are definitely expectations that Iris has put on her, but for all intents, like when you really think about it, she kind of knows that the world is kind of her oyster, if you will. On the other hand, Aubrey is close with his mother, and he moves in this space of survival. Like I said, they're poor, and so they live off of government assistance, but she only wants to accept so much. And so for him, the world is not necessarily his oyster. And I know sometimes people who grow up in poverty kind of have that mindset where, like, I would do anything to get out of this. But he doesn't view it in that way. because he's a kind guy and he's a sensitive guy. He just wants to do what he thinks is right for his family. And so in these two families, we have this decision that they have to make when Iris gets pregnant, when Iris and Aubrey get pregnant. How do we navigate it? And for Iris, having a baby doesn't necessarily stop her life in any long-lasting way, to the detriment of her relationship with her daughter. And then Aubrey, having this baby changes him in a way that makes him focus on surviving. He's got to take care of a kid now. And that idea of, I have to take care of my kid, gets him a job in a mailroom, and he likes it. And he's actually content with working there. And Iris is like, I don't understand that, because Iris is always focused on more. So that piece kind of pulls Iris and Aubrey away from each other too. And so that moves us into what is this idea of what's enough, or what does it mean to want more in life? After Melody is born, Iris decides, okay, I'm going to go to college anyway. She was originally kicked out of school because she went to a Catholic school, and obviously they're not letting this pregnant girl stay. So she gets kicked out of school, and then Kathy Marie, Aubrey's mom, looks at her and says, like, hey, I struggled. You don't have to. You're going to finish school. So they start working together while she's pregnant, and after she has her baby, she goes back to a public school in the area, and then obviously does well enough and goes to college. She gets into several schools, and she goes to Oberlin, which is in Ohio, and she goes pretty much because it's far. So she's ready to, having this baby was just like it was a pit stop. She goes off to Oberlin, and her goal is to do more, to be more, and not just a teenage mother. And then Aubrey, he works in this mailroom, and he's like, okay, I'm fine here because I'm getting paid way more than I've ever gotten paid before, because it's a mailroom in this fancy New York office. They live in New York. And Iris is like, how can you only want this? And so it brings to this idea of, what does it mean to want more in life? And it's something that I can relate to, because I do not have very lofty goals. And sometimes I talk to people who like, oh, you could be in this elevated position. And the reality is, I don't necessarily want to, only because I do not want to be in a position where I have to devote every part of my life to its achievement. And so often these elevated positions means that family falls to the wayside, that you fall to the wayside. And that's never something I've aspired to. But we've lived in a culture for a very long time of like, having elevated success almost to the detriment of our relationships. And is that a bad thing to not want that? And so that's something kind of that we see a little bit too. And I think one of the biggest things that we see kind of within family dynamics is the relationship between mothers and daughters in this book. And honestly, probably even just parents and their children. It just seems more stark in the women, because Iris is, for all intents and purposes, an absent mom. And Sable, grandma, finds herself somewhat disappointed by Iris. And we get various points of view. So we get to see how Po Boy and Aubrey navigate Po Boy becoming a granddad before he's ready to, and before he wants his daughter to have a baby. And then Aubrey obviously having a kid when he's a child. But we see kind of how they grow and develop in their relationships with Melody. But it brings up this question, though, of how much does a parent have to give up for their children? Specifically, how much of themselves must they let go of to be a great parent? Iris kind of gives it away. Like, parenthood is not what she expected. The bond that she had, that she wanted to have with her daughter upon birth, didn't happen. And so she wants to separate herself from that. And in that separation, and you can tell how much she cares about Melody, but it's not in a way that we think of when like moms have to give of themselves for her. And so Melody calls her Iris because she's not the one who raised her. Her dad raised her. Her grandparents raised her. And we see in these flashbacks how and why Iris pulls away from her daughter. And then Aubrey, on the other hand, he's all in. He moves in with the grandparents so that they live in a better place, and so he can be there for his daughter all of the time. And he never talks about regretting it. But it just makes you wonder, right? How much of the sacrifices that our parents make for us can form resentment, you know? So it makes me think about, is there a balance? Can you be yourself while being a parent? Or is one always going to fall to the wayside? Is there no way to balance them? I don't have any kids. I don't have an inclination to have any children, but I can only imagine how difficult navigating that dichotomy can be. My relationships with my parents are very interesting, probably not book worthy, but especially my father and my stepfather. But in thinking about mothers and daughters, my relationship with my mother, I think, has always been pretty good. I hope. Tell me, Mom. And now I think it's really good. We have a great relationship. We talk all the time. But I have friends who mention this sort of up and down relationship with their mothers. And the story talks about that. The contention stemming from absence in one case and then not necessarily being who Mom wanted you to be in another. But kind of that love and that care that moms have for their daughters mixed in with this contention of, why are you not who I envision you to be? And I think that's true for a lot of parent-child relationships, where parents have these expectations and sometimes the children don't live up to them. But there's also the opposite, right? Where children have expectations of their parents and they don't live up to them. And so you see that in this book in both cases, where in one relationship, daughter does not live up to what mom wants to be, and in the other, mom does not live up to what the daughter wants it to be. And you see how that affects the way they move in the world. It's good, y'all. And so in the midst of all of this, there are these connections to Tulsa. Sable's parents were survivors of the race massacre. I think Sable's mom was too, during the race massacre. And so she talks about what it means to be a survivor of such a massacre of such destruction. And so after the race massacre, they moved to Chicago and then eventually to New York. And in New York, what in the book, what's it called? Sorry. 9/11. I'm so sorry. 9/11 happens. And so there's more fire, right? More destruction. And so that's kind of what, in this book, this idea of what comes after a destruction. A destruction of property, destruction of family, destruction of ideals of life. What happens after that? And by the end of it, there's some grappling happening. People that is answered for some of our characters in a way that is kind of sad. But I did cry a little bit. I devoured this book in like 4 hours between working. So go read it. It's incredible. It's lyrical. It's poignant. It is one book that you have to pay attention to. Obviously, you have to pay attention to all books, but it's written in various points of view, and the points of view are not always named, so you have to kind of guess at it. But the voices are so different that it is easy. And quotes. Oh my God, the quotes. I've got a wall full of quotes in my room. So I love quotes, and there's such good things in this one. So I am so sorry that I've been speaking for 15 minutes. I tried to not, so I'll stop talking now. Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. Go read it and let me know what you think about it. Next week, I am reading Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. We will also talk about it actually maybe not, it may be Sankofa, by an author whose name I cannot remember right now. I'm not sure, but you'll see next week when you come. I'll see y'all then. Bye.